So our speaker is Karim, is it Jaffer? Jaffer, from the John Abbott College in Montreal. And appropriately, it's about student engagement and bringing astronomy alive. Okay, it's all yours.
I can't stand still. I'm going to have to move around. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Karim Jaffer. I'm the prof for astronomy at John Abbott College. It's a cégep in Montreal. For those of you who are not familiar with the setup, in Quebec, the last year of high school in most of the other provinces, the grade 12, as well as the first year of university, are placed together in a separate institution to promote students to really transition from the high school years to a career path or a university study path where their engagement, their ideas, their plan of an action plan for the future or an area for them to explore is supported. What we do at John Abbott in physics is very much a set of core materials and then option courses, both for science students and for non-science students. Astronomy falls into one of our option courses for science students. And as such, typically we get students that have any amount of science background from one core course in introductory mechanics all the way through to having completed all of their core courses before they go on to second year university. So what we end up with is students who have a high school level introduction to space sciences, to the solar system, and a little bit of extra gravitation and mechanics. Some of them have taken electricity and magnetism. Some of them have taken optics and modern physics. They understand a little bit of how refracting lenses work. They understand a little bit of how images are formed. But by no means have they ever seen this in a context where they can actually apply it. In astronomy, we don't as much care about how much physics they have as where their passion comes from. And when we look at these students, we find that about 70% of them have read or have some interest in the night sky, but less than 10% have ever looked through a telescope or are avid backyard astronomers or have ever belonged to a society or a group, whether it's scouts and guides coming out to one of our events or whether it's themselves having an interest in owning a telescope or something along those lines. So less than 10% have any concrete exposure to astronomy. Now, before I go into what I do and why I do it the way I do at John Abbott, what our students do and what our partnership is with RASC Montreal, how do I know that what I'm doing has any benefit? And the way I know is because by the time these students leave, we've taken all of these different backgrounds and we've brought them together for one complete picture, like we do when we're analyzing the sun, where we take all the different wavelengths and we use them to find an actual picture of what the sun's dynamics are. We bring all of these student experiences together and we end up with 25 to 33% of our graduating students from John Abbott interested in pursuing a career in space sciences, applying to whether it's physics or aerospace engineering or astrobiology. They find that they have not just a passion, but a path available to them. The reason is, just like we do with the sun, we recognize that we need different tools for different backgrounds. So these students can't all be painted with the same brush. We have to expose them to all the different ways they can come on board with the curriculum and with the ideas of astronomy that we find of interest in RASC ourselves. So before I go into the course a little bit more, I just want to give you a bit of background so you understand why the course developed the way it did. I had a passion in astronomy as a little kid. And the very first event I ever organized was a space shuttle launch viewing in my elementary school. I was so happy, so excited, and it was the Challenger launch. So my career stopped. There was no way I was moving forward with this passion, with this idea. I still loved space, but I lost that drive that this could be where I go, and my mom was adamant I was not leaving the Earth. That was not happening. Then in graduate school, I actually had a chance to pursue astrophysics, and I was really excited because I was coming in at the ground floor of gravitational wave theory. I was working on signal design for LIGO, and my supervisor, it was a bit of a hiccup, and he decided that he was leaving and he was going to another university. So I switched over to polymer physics. Happily, I was ecstatic. I loved polymer physics, and I became a theoretical physicist. I got teaching positions, I got to teach, I developed courses in all different fields. I ended up teaching in education for a while. And then 3 years ago, at the start of the summer, our astronomy and our astrophysics profs both retired. And neither of them had an exit plan. So I stepped up to teach astrophysics. Another gentleman stepped up to teach astronomy. And mid-June, he said, I want to teach astrophysics. I don't want to teach astronomy. I had no background, but I said, you know what? I'll learn it. I'll teach it, because we need astronomy in our curriculum. So I learned the science over the summer as best as I could, and come mid-July, I realized I don't know how to use a telescope. I know what's up there, I just don't know how to find it. So I reached out to RASC, and RASC said, come on down. So I went with my family. I became a family member. I went to the first outing, and David Schumann, Carl Jorgensen, Paul Simard, all of our astronomers came. They took my kids by hand. They showed them how to use telescopes. They explained to me what I was missing. And I knew right then and there that RASC needed a place in my course. More than that, my students needed to know what RASC had to offer. So what I did with my course is I decided I'm leaving the course in the hands of the students. If I can learn all the science over the summer that I need to teach, all the expert level knowledge, I realized that a textbook wasn't the way to go. Astronomy is changing constantly. Space sciences is changing constantly. So we went with the dynamic model. Start of the course, I give the students a survey sheet with many different topics, and I'll show you that in a few moments, and I let them tell me where their interests lie. And from those, I develop the course schedule that same week. What I start with instead of the actual class content is what's available for careers in space sciences. And we are very lucky in Montreal. We have the CSA, we have MDA, we have Pratt Whitney, we have Bombardier. I can show them elements of all of it. I walk them through the CSA, and their first assignment is actually to explore the CSA website and bring me back information on the paths all the different astronauts took, the different research projects, the satellites, the rovers, all of that. And I have them actually examine and see where a career in space sciences could go, right at the start. In that amount of time, in the lab, I'm teaching them observing tools. So I'm walking them through elementary optics in refractor and reflecting telescopes. I teach them how to use binoculars. I explain to them the rotation of the night sky and what it is that we see throughout the year. And I give them a really quick intro to the night sky like we do in our public events. Through that, I make sure that they understand the Earth, Moon, Sun system. The amount of students at the college level that are blown away with the fact that you can see the moon during the day is ridiculous. But it's true. At our public events, when somebody comes late and the room is completely filled up, and we say, come to the telescopes, we'll show you the moon. And they're like, but the sun's still up. And you're like, that's fine. It's the quarter moon, you can see it. It's amazing how many people don't understand those dynamics of a simple three-body system that we live with every day. So we make sure they understand those, and then in that amount of time, I can analyze their survey of topics. So I give them everything in an introductory astronomy textbook, and I have them rank their top 10. From those rankings, I choose the topics and the depth to which I will cover material in class, and I make sure that that depth isn't coming from me. First 2 years, I did a minor project where the students give me every single class a week before, 2 students to 3 students, provide me with an article on the topic we're going to cover, and sample questions they feel are relevant to that article. One of those becomes the pre-class reading. The actual questions become a pre-class quiz, and in class, I start from there. So if it's Saturn, some people will give us the NASA website with just a little bit of introduction. Other students will give us a dynamic overview of Cassini's final plunge. Depending on what they give me depends on how deep I have to go in class and what the students themselves see. But for me, that's not enough. Because if I just cover this material, I'm not doing that much more than an actual textbook. It's just today's material. That's the only difference. Problem is, if I'm going to treat these students like different wavelengths of light, I have to recognize that they have different core interests that will drive them. So I also ask them for their top 3 questions, things they want answered by the end of that term. And based on those, the students get to commit to a 25% of the full mark major project every year. Here's an example of the types of major projects that we end up with. We end up with everything from building telescopes to measuring topology of the moon using astrophotography, making actual spectroscopic analysis of objects, capturing cosmic rays and analyzing their behavior, designing a space station or a space elevator, orbital mechanics. I had one group that did the orbital mechanics of the TRAPPIST system, all the way down to groups of students coming from social sciences who want to examine the financial side, the historical side, the space race. Whatever their passion, I will support it. That results in 14 to 18 major projects every fall term. I could not do that on my own. So what we do is we provide mentoring with RASC Montreal Centre. The building telescopes, the taking astrophotography, all of that is supported by the astronomers, the amateur astronomers in our RASC Montreal Centre. They meet with the students during our normal club meetings. They provide the students with ideas, but more to the point, they listen to the students' ideas and tell them what's feasible and what's not according to current tools. And then if the students have ideas that they can't support, they suggest other places to get that support. And we now have also partnerships with some of the university groups that then take over and mentor students in satellite design and all sorts of projects. This all happens because of our partnership. And when I joined RASC, one of the first things I found out was that we actually have a RASC Montreal library that was hidden away in one of our classrooms that was about to be renovated. So we've changed that. That library is now at a prominent location. We have monthly library meetings with speakers for members, and the members now include the students with full privileges for member activities, even though they're not required to take on a membership. And I'll explain why in a few minutes. The other thing that we do is we do our education, research, and public outreach from day one, and the students are made aware of these opportunities. So when they come into that first day of classes, before they've chosen their topics, before I've given them a curriculum or a class schedule or a lab schedule, I give them a list of every possible RASC outing that term that they can go to for night skies, that they can go to for public outreach, that they can volunteer at. And I tell them, and this is clear, there is no evaluation component to this. You want to do this? It's your choice. You don't want to do this? That's fine. It will not impact your grade. However, what you'll find, and we bring in testimonials from prior students, is it does impact your learning. Because if you have an interest in this area, here's your chance to explore it. By week 2, we have students like Julian, who's going to speak next, volunteering at our public events. We have students coming out to our dark sky nights. We have students running telescopes and learning how to use them. All of that happens before the project topics are even brought up, before the students even know that they're going to be doing a major project. All of that happens when the students are still going, I wanted to take an option course, astronomy looked cool, I've always thought space was fun, I want to learn about it. So we say, fine, learn in class, get graded in class, but if you really want to learn, come and see how we treat the night sky. Come and see what you can actually see from Montreal. And we're lucky. In our observatory, where we do our members events and where we do our public events, we have the darkest skies on the island of Montreal. Montreal is a cesspool for light pollution, but we have the darkest skies there. Our night sky, or dark sky place is an hour and a half away, which is hard to get to for most students. However, those that are interested typically come with second-year students who've stuck around and said, we still want to keep coming out, we still want to be a part of this. In this mentoring that we give, we don't just give mentoring in the projects, we give mentoring in public outreach. A lot of our students are going to be our frontline communicators down the road. They may be teachers, they may be journalists, or they may just be the person that's talking to their kid and explaining stuff to them that they don't understand in school. In any of that, our RASC membership has experience talking to the public. We have experience explaining stuff to them in the telescopes. We have experience talking to kids who have no idea what they're seeing but really want to see it. Those are experiences most students have not had. So mentoring them in how to talk to the public and how to reach out. And the importance of volunteering your time and your knowledge back to the community is essential. We also have these students who are volunteering, starting to take leadership roles further on in the term. And I'm going to talk about that in a few moments. But I want to point something out to you here. This previous picture, that was our Townsend last year. That's Steve Iris from the CSA, the project manager for the RadarSat constellation that just went up last week, being interviewed by the student newspaper representative and being guided by a member of the Canadian press who happens to be one of our members. Those are the types of mentoring opportunities these students can get if we open our doors to them. Here's what our library looks like now. Our library has a periodicals collection that dates all the way back to the 1700s. We have material from the 1800s and early 1900s that are debating quantum mechanics, which we now have students from McGill coming when they hear about this to sit in and say, can we come in and see your library? Because these are materials that we have in the old Sky issues, in the old issues from the Royal Journal of Astronomy, that most people don't recognize the importance of the work that was published back then. We also have our normal discussion groups, but our students get an opportunity to come back and present their knowledge to the RASC astronomers. So they get to actually finish their project in the fall, and the following fall, come back after they've entered university and chat with the RASC astronomers and say, here's what we learned and here's what we're doing with it. Observing telescopes. At the college, I'm able to get some money and I put it into a nice NextStar, a nice Dob, and a solar telescope, and that's great, but that's at the campus, in front of parking lights. It's not a great observing opportunity. Now, when I took over, we had broken observing equipment that hadn't been used in a decade, so I did replace it, but I realized it wasn't enough to get students to understand what astronomy means now. So luckily, through RASC, we not only have our 14-inch telescope in the observatory, we also now have a 16-inch telescope at our dark sky site that the students are allowed to use. You'll notice here at the opening ceremony of the telescope, we have a dynamic group now. We have youth, we have adults, we have diverse group from many different backgrounds, cultures, religions, all of them coming together because they see when they come to our public events that it's a dynamic group offering the public outreach. That wasn't enough though, because a lot of our students can't come out to these night events. They're working, they have clubs, they're on swim team. They want to visit the night sky, but they can't do it with RASC. So with RASC's help, I trained a student in how to build telescopes, and last summer, I took time off from taking time off, went in, and we built 5 Dobsonians. We also collected a set of refurbished binoculars from Stellafane, from a gentleman there who refurbishes eyepieces and binoculars, and I set up all of this equipment that in total, all of the parts cost me $120. And with all of that, we ended up with a total of 22 borrowings of binoculars and 9 borrowings of the Dobsonian telescopes. Now, why only 9 of the Dobsonian telescopes? Look at them. They're bulky. You can't carry them on the bus. You can barely fit them in your car. And most of the students who use the telescopes had come to a RASC outing and learned how to use them for themselves first. So what I'm doing for next year is I've actually put in for funding to get smaller tabletop and backpack refractor telescopes that students can take on the bus to go home. And the students have been asking for this, so we're doing it. Now, as word got out with the amount of things we're doing with RASC and the mentorship that they're providing, one of the things that came out of that is multidisciplinary initiatives. We have an environmental certificate course designation that we got because we had students doing tidal forces studies on the effects of tidal waves in different parts of the world. We had students doing light pollution studies. We had students doing studies on orbital mechanics, the moon, and how that's changing over time and what could happen down the road. And with all of the work that we're doing in terms of terrestrial mechanics and the evolution of planetary systems, we touch on a lot of environmental issues. So we now have environmental students taking the courses. We have information and library technologies, which is a career program. It's a 3-year program. And those students actually helped us inventory our collection and document our small library collection. Arts and sciences, I'm going to talk a bit more about in a few minutes. But what they do is their first-year course, the visual arts, is a studio course. They learn all different techniques. But the teacher decided she wanted a final project that made them dream big. So with the help of RASC, we open up our library, they come in 1 weekday during class time, and then 3 weeknights with the RASC members around, and they explore the library, and they have to pitch an arts proposal. Small demo, large scale proposal. So we had one student pitch a galaxy painting the first year, a mural on the side of a building that's been commissioned. We had one student make ceramics of 2 planets of the solar system and had pitched the idea of a whole set. And she's actually currently negotiating with the buyer. We had one student do a light pollution map where every single city was reflected by what a star would look like if it was in place of that city, no matter the size of that city. The ideas that they came up with were just phenomenal. And then we had one student who wanted to do astrophysics, but needed to do art. So she decided to take a very simple design, and if you zoom in, every single bit of that design is an astrophysics equation from an orbital mechanics textbook written in order to create that design. In addition, we have our mathematics statistics course using exoplanet detection as their project of choice. We did an independent research course where I had a student who actually got to discover an exoplanet at Bishop's University using Kepler data. And then we had with biology, the National Science Literacy Week last year where we focused on astrobiology. And RASC set up an evening library night to chat with them. We're also looking at many still to come, including the possibility of doing astrophotography and image processing and more spectral analysis. But in this visual arts course, the return has been amazing. I told you about 2 of them. David this morning mentioned that there was a student who did a musical composition of radio signals from space who did the documentary soundtrack for their Shadow Chasers documentary. That student was also approached by Walt Disney with the opportunity to perhaps pitch a soundtrack for a movie where they wanted real science captured in their animated movie. This year, we ended up with crater sketching by Bettina Forget, one of our past presidents, and that is a pop-up station that we're running right now at the Outreach Center over in Very Hall. We also had pop-up stations at the International Astronomy Day, which I'll tell you about in a few moments. From that visual arts final project, this was the 2nd year we had it, 22 students. Not a single repeat project from last year. No overlap. We now have 43 independent art proposals, all inspired by our library, all completely unique, including things like women astronomers on a galaxy background, following along the lines of Bettina Forget's project, a mural representing every stage of stellar evolution, an architectural design for a park based around the constellations. And one of my favorites, this student took a pair of pants, started at the bottom, and it's hard to see here, but at the very bottom, you actually have the silhouette of an entire family sitting around 2 telescopes staring up into the night sky. But what got me with this student is she depicted the entire solar system all the way up to her blouse, which was bright yellow as the sun. The planets of the solar system were accurate. She had the angle of the rings on Uranus different from Saturn. She had the red dot on Jupiter and then had an indication that the turning direction of Venus was in the wrong direction. These are art students capturing the science that we want them to learn. And that just blew me away. So, first year I did this. At the end of that year, the students stepped up and said, we want to run the student eclipse, or the solar eclipse. We don't want RASC to run it, we want to run it, and we want RASC to bring the telescopes. They ran the event the first day of class in 2017, 2,000 people in attendance. The students ran a full day program, not just for the time of the solar eclipse. We had a 62% eclipse visible, we had 2,000 people on the field sharing the day sky. That told me the course has left the classroom. The students are now engaged, they're alert, they're loving this, they're using this, and this is exactly what I was hoping to see from this group. On top of that, we actually ended up with, over the span of the next year and a half, the students being involved either by giving or by helping to set up and run all of these of our public events. This is a third of our public events of the year were involved either in giving or organizing from the students, from the youth, from not just the ones who are getting the free membership status, but also the ones who graduate and then become youth members, of which we now have a dozen. In addition, this year we ran the International Astronomy Day at the Montreal Planetarium, and for this, the students ended up bringing in the student groups. So we had 30 activities, 18 organizations, of which 8 were post-secondary student groups beyond CEGEP, and 3 CEGEPs, including mine at John Abbott. From John Abbott, we had 23 students and 18 graduates come and volunteer at this event throughout the day. From 11 a.m. to 11 p.m., all of those students participated. And the logistics ended up, the planetarium hired one of our former students to run the logistics. One of the activities. Now, according to our rules, we are not allowed to show the faces of the students or the youth that come to our public events when we incorporate it into the college publications or college presentations. But if you could have seen that kid's face afterwards, he was smiling for the next 4 hours and would not leave. He went from booth to booth, activity to activity, even did the crater sketching workshop. He was 9 years old and he did an amazing job. In order to give you some idea of how valuable this is, our RASC president sent the following feedback, and I just want to read a few bits to you. This has resulted in a dynamic energy that was unprecedented. The John Abbott students have become an integral part of the Montreal Centre by not only attending observing sessions, but organizing events, giving presentations, and even becoming paid members. I would encourage all centers of RASC to be forward-thinking and form an active partnership with your local colleges and universities. Now, he mentions that students come back. They don't just come back. 2 of our executive are graduated youth from John Abbott. I want you to hear from them briefly. This is Yusuf Pastavros. He's one of the ones who actually is a physics student who wants to become an astrophysicist. This is what gets me. Not only did he motivate him to learn more because he wanted to share the knowledge, that he wanted to contribute his ideas, and so he stepped up to be our librarian, but more to the point, it helps me to cope and even get rid of any anxiety accumulated over the week. For me, there is a noticeable difference in my level of productivity and focus in my week if I do not attend RASC and JAC astronomy outreach activities versus attending them. Now here's Catherine Dulong. Catherine is one of our members who is our Skyward editor, our newsletter editor. Listen to this. I love the way my heartbeat slows and my pupils expand as I stare up at the night sky. The night sky makes me feel alive, it makes me feel human, it makes me feel real. I will never formally study physics. She's adamant about that. She will never study physics. She's in dietetics. She wants to be a nutritionist or a doctor down the road. She refuses to study physics. She doesn't even care about the biomechanics side of things, but I love the experiential learning associated with astronomy. Even though my academic goals are totally unrelated to astronomy, this discipline has allowed me to develop communication skills that allow me to thrive in academia. The soft skills we employ in our public events bring the students to another level. The hard skills help those who have a career path in space sciences, that 25 to 33% I told you about, but the other 67 to 75%, the soft skills stick with them. Over the span of a term, 90% of my students attend at least one RASC event. 90%. More than a quarter end up volunteering in our public outreach. That's the message I want to leave you with. This is incredibly valuable for the students, and it helps us so much in our public outreach because the students see things, they give us ideas, they bring a dynamic that we cannot reproduce ourselves. Thank you.